Subscribe now or face my fury.
Directed by William Stead, produced by Louisa Warren and written by Tom Jolliffe, we are talking Raptor Attack, also known as Raptor's Revenge. And this was a low-budget 2026 British movie. So the story focuses on two generations of a family that are travelling to see, like, the matriarch, the grandmother, who lives in the country. But little do they know, this grandmother is actually involved in genetic engineering, and she's been doing experiments in her farmhouse and has created a genetically engineered velociraptor, and it has got loose and has killed the grandmother. So when this kind of family turn up, the grandmother is dead. They're obviously devastated. They don't know what's gone on. They know nothing about this damn raptor. But this raptor is still around and wants its revenge on this family for killing its sibling. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So, let's discuss. So we've seen lots of low-budget British kind of B-movie horror sci-fis come out in recent years. Many of them produced by Louisa Warren, who's produced this. What did I like about this one? Okay, so I have to say it starts off a little quieter, this film. And that might sound like it's going to be a criticism, but I actually kind of liked it. Because to me, the quieter kind of setup of this movie, it just felt a little bit more confident to me in regards to the direction of the film and the way it kind of deals with kind of this family dynamic, which I kind of quite liked. So we have this kind of the prologue really showing the grandmother, and she's kind of going out looking for this kind of raptor and everything. And it's as you say, it's a relatively long prologue, and it's kind of a quiet. She's an elderly woman, so she's kind of like walking around the forestry area and stuff, and you just get to feel like, I don't know, it felt a little bit more confident. I quite liked it. It kind of, ultimately, the raptor ends up, attacking, but nonetheless, it sort of is a little bit of a difference from the normal kind of insta-kill that you kind of get at the beginning of all these kind of like low-budget films and horror films in general, I suppose. I quite liked it. And what I also liked, which is kind of similar, was the family relationship here. So we have, like, the mother and the father and two daughters, who are, the daughters are, they're in their sort of 20s or so. And I quite like the depiction of the family, because unlike a lot of films that have kind of inflated drama and that someone's having an affair and all the rest of it, I actually thought this family kind of got on quite well, and it had a little bit more of a realistic family dynamic to it. So I think this movie actually, I don't think anyone's going to be willing to watch this because of the family dynamics, but when you're looking at a film, I would say what does work is that it has a more realistic, let me not oversell it here, but a more realistic kind of family dynamic, which makes you care more about the characters, because they do seem like a real family. They do have these kind of little interactions, there's little, pop culture references and things like that, and they do seem like, a genuine family, which I think, enables us to kind of relate to them a little bit more than the kind of the throwaway sort of like typical young girls who end up running around in a house like a lot of these movies tend to be. So that I kind of quite liked. Now, low budget VFX have come a long way in the last few years, and I think the effects of this one are better, certainly from even this same production company. Now, part of the reason why this is because it's use of AI, which I suspect was used to make this. Now, again, I feel like we're going to have this conversation a lot this kind of next couple of years, whether you like it or don't. AI in movies is here to stay, and it's been becoming a lot more prevalent as the kind of time goes on. Like it or loathe it, it's here to stay. I actually think it's a decent tool where you can get better VFX than you could do on a kind of that were out of reach of low budget filmmakers. So some of the effects, I mean, they're not all brilliant. We're not quite there yet in regards to incorporating these kind of realistic, creature effects. But, when you think of the kind of the CGI creatures that you would have got like 5 years ago, I gotta say, it looks sort of impressive. And the movie, it has like, AI gore and stuff like that. I didn't think it looked too bad, to be brutally honest. I will say as well, I think the movie's shot relatively well, and it takes place in this kind of English countryside, and a lot of these films they kind of pretend they're in America. This one is, I mean, there's one thing I'll point out, but later on, but this kind of British countryside looks quite good. It's quite well shot, and like I said, there is some confidence in the directing here. Just there's a few establishing shots, and I feel like the as the film goes on, because ultimately what it comes down to is, a family being chased around this kind of farmyard and the surrounding areas by a dinosaur. So it's not exactly a deep plot, but nonetheless, I think that the confidence in filmmaking within that premise is kind of relatively strong. And I think that the setting looks good, the location shooting looks pretty good, looks out the way. There's some nice kind of photography kind of here and there, some decent kind of camera work, so on a technical level, I gotta say, I think it's relatively proficient. And I would say, I think the acting isn't too bad either. I said, I like the way these characters are depicted as a family. I mean, look, the acting, it's a low budget B movie. I'm not suggesting this is like Oscar worthy, but for the context of the movie that this is, and, when you compare it to a lot of films that, in its sort of ilk, so to speak, I thought the acting was fair. At least fair. I mean, maybe not brilliant. I mean, I think maybe the grandma's a little on the weaker side, but, there are some kind of there's some reasonable performance. I at least believe them in the roles of this family. So there's that. So let's talk about what doesn't work. I mean, ultimately, it's a little bit of a silly but unpredictable plot. Why is this grandma making dinosaurs? There's kind of like a throwaway line, some sort of government thing, and she just wanted to do this experiment because she loves velociraptors. All right. I mean, why is it in well, we know why it's Jurassic Park. Why but I'll say the question: why do we have to have this version of velociraptors when this is not what they actually were like? They're a lot smaller, but since Jurassic Park, this is now what people have been trained to think velociraptors are like. Anyway, side point, it's not just that film, it's every film. Anyway, so, there's some kind of logic issues of why create them. Even the movie doesn't know. It doesn't really ever answer that. And why she created them? Don't know. Well, we can't think of a good reason, so we're just going to skip over that. How is she created? How is she, we don't know. Again, who cares? There's a raptor, and it strikes me as an odd choice really to have what is commonly known as more of a pack hunter, to have a one solitary raptor. I mean, sure, it's dangerous, but I mean, raptors famously are a pack hunter. So we have Robert the Raptor. Seriously, that's its name. So yeah, I mean, there's some silliness. There's a scene, for example, as well, where we have a British police detective who's got a gun. As famously, if you're unaware, but I don't think many people are, British police aren't armed unless it's like a specific unit. You're not going to get a random country detective carrying a gun. And maybe this is to sell it to American audiences, but it's not really trying to be like a fake American like some of these are. So that struck me as a little weird. I mean, and on the subject of sort of plot contrivances and silliness, there's this whole plot about there's this sort of poison or formula or something which is designed to kill this raptor. It's an animal, a shotgun that will work just fine. There's also a funny moment, I have to say as well, where our mother, because she goes out and starts hunting it with a bread knife. I thought, out of all the knives you could pick, a bread knife. Anyway, so yeah, there's some goofy elements here, that's for sure. I think, to be honest with you, the film is ultimately a bunch of people running around being chased around by a computer-generated creature, and that's basically the movie. It's not particularly interesting, I have to say. I mean, it's a sort of very much a kind of a cookie cutter creature running around chasing after people. But it isn't especially interesting, and it borders on a little kind of goofy at times, like I said. And you just have to kind of like, roll your eyes at the kind of the silliness to it to a large degree. And like I said, I think for the most part, I think they do use a little bit of practical, I should point out. The effects, I think, clearly made by AI, but they're reasonable for the most part. But there are a few instances where, I don't know, the kind of like the frame rate kind of ends up being a little wonky at times, and it ends up some sequences, particularly in the kind of the more action heavy sequences, it doesn't quite work and things like that. We're not quite at that level yet. Give it a couple of years and I'm sure these things will be different, but that's where we are now. It's a fine B movie. I actually got to say, I think this is a more enjoyable low budget British movie than a lot of them. And this was the same production company that made the much more interestingly titled Sharks vs. Mermaid. But I would say this is a better film. It's just not as flashy, really. Maybe a little bit lackluster in regards to memorability, because it's just like, standard kind of monster in the kind of like running around outside type thing. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. It's fine. It's fine if you just want a kind of undemanding creature feature entertainment. You'll never watch it again, but it's fine for a one-time watch. So 5 out of 10.